Good evening, readers and writers. Welcome to the very first edition of the Libby Book Club for WA. I'm your host, David Allen Patali. If you don't know me, I'm a local author. My book, Locust Summer, came out in 2021 with the local press, Fremantle Press, and it's available actually through the Libby app as an ebook and also as an audiobook. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm broadcasting tonight from the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to their continuing connection to country and to elders past and present. A few weeks ago, we had the launch of the government's new national cultural policy called Revive, which puts First Nations first. And it also established a new representative body for the nation's writers. So it's an incredibly exciting time for storytellers and, above all, readers. Now, the usual run of a book club, at least the ones I've attended, is to gather at someone's home, maybe bring a plate, have a wine or two, a cup of tea, if that's your poison. Libby Book Club is exactly the same. It's online. Because the Libby app, it's an online experience where you can access anything from the latest bestseller to your favorite magazines, movies, anything you can get from your local library, you can get on the Libby app. So download it if you haven't. And I'll be guiding the discussion tonight, but I'd love for you to contribute questions as we go. So please jump into the text box with any question you'd like for our author tonight. And I'll do my best to either weave them into the chat or leave some time at the end to read them out and she can engage with it, which brings me very neatly to Genevieve Gannon. Her book, The Gifted Son, has just been published by Allen and Unwin. It's our feature book this month for the Libby Book Club for WA. It's the debut book for the Libby Book Club for WA, and I'm really excited to have her here, especially given the time difference. Genevieve, how late is it where you are?
It's 10 p.m.
10 p.m. on a school night.
Yeah. And we've got quite an elaborate lighting rig going to try and make it look a little bit brighter. It's quite dark in here. I kind of want to show you actually, but do you know what? I want to show you. I was saying to my partner's a filmmaker, and I was saying, oh, maybe I should bring the green lamp in, and he was like, "Are you crazy? Oh wow." Yep. And then one of the professional ones. I don't know if you can see that. So,
well,
very professional to join you for the Libby Book Club.
I just have my desk lamp shining on me, so points to you. Genevieve, can you tell us about your book, The Gifted Son? It's a very large question, but what's it about?
It is a large question. It's a funny one. As I mentioned a little earlier, David, it was a COVID book, so lots of time to sit with it and dwell. I guess the quick answer is it is about those events that happen to all of us in our lives that really shake our world and make us question everything about our lives and what we've been doing and the decisions that we've made, and when something like that happens to you and your family, what you do next. So I think Lee Sales wrote a lot about post-traumatic growth in her book, and I think anyone who's had something happen to them in their life that's really rocked their world will know that dealing with something like that can be really confronting, but it's what you do next that makes you. So it follows a family. There's an incident really early on, and each member of that family goes on a bit of a journey from that point.
I was going to say, I read that Lee Sales book too, as Any Ordinary Day.
Yeah.
Incredibly impactful, dangerous things happen to people's lives, and they think that's the end, but it's not. Is that the notion you really wanted to explore? Did you connect with that notion, or was it existing in your heart already?
Yeah, I suppose there were two things, and Lee Sales as a journalist probably, well, we know, has encountered a lot of people on their worst days, and working as a journo, that is something that happens to you, and it never ceases to amaze me how people respond to things and rise to things. And absolutely, there are people who get really crushed by something that is crushing, and understandably so. And then there are other people who, really rise to an occasion and can be quite heroic. And not to say that one is right or one is wrong, but it's just really interesting. So it's been really interesting to me to see how people respond and react. A big theme of the book is forgiveness. Maybe I shouldn't say that because it kind of comes in later, but I have interviewed some amazing people, including probably more familiar to the Sydney people. The Abdullah family, who you may know, had 3 of their children killed in a car crash in Oatlands. And I've had the good fortune to spend a bit of time with them, and learn from them and listen to them speak about what it was like to move past something like that. And I kind of feel like I've gotten off on a tangent, because that's not really, the book doesn't really go that dark, but I suppose these are the things that you think about when you're a working journo, and these are the ideas that have been channeled into the Hogarth family experience.
Oh, there's so much to ask you.
I know. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but
I
yeah.
know that's right. Just for the benefit of if anyone hasn't read it, I have, of course. You have, you wrote it. Probably
I've read it many
I'll just
times.
read the blurb. So it says, with 2 bright children, a beautiful home, and a husband she's always depended on, Lillian Hogarth considers herself blessed, until on her son Jamie's final day of high school, he fails to come home. Hospitalised by a coward's punch, Jamie has been the victim of a muck-up day celebration that went too far. Lillian's support is unflinching, even as her world begins to crumble. A son whose fate hangs in the balance, a teenage witness refusing to name the one who threw the punch, and a husband who's hiding a secret that could destroy their marriage. Is this the end of the Hogarth family's good luck? Or will Jamie's determination and Lillian's love be the making of them? In a lot of ways, this is a story about, like you say, that pivotal moment, but it's also the story of forgiveness and the emergence of hope. That's something that I kept coming back to. Is this a book that you had to explore the feelings of first before you could express them, or did that come through the writing?
That's such a good question. And this is actually the first book I ever attempted to write, adult full-length novel in a completely different form. And so what year would that have been? Maybe 10 years ago, I had a crack at writing a book that followed this kind of arc, and it was inspired by someone I interviewed who had had a traumatic incident, and there were a lot of ideas around that where I thought, oh, I'd love to write a story that sort of looked at what happens next and so forth. And it was very bad. My current editor, Annette Barlow, read it and kind of, patted me on the head. And she wasn't my publisher at the time. She was just someone I sent an email to and, please read this. And she so kindly met me for a coffee and gave me a copy of The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty and said, oh, look, you're going to need to take some writing classes, in a very kind way. And thank God she did. But so, that was a long time ago, and I worked very hard to learn how to be a better writer since then. But another thing that changed was, as I mentioned before, everyone has things that happen to them, and certainly my family went through a difficult time, and reapproaching this book, having been through that, meant that it was a completely different experience, and creating those emotions and thinking about how people react to things was completely different. And really just thank God Annette didn't publish that first version, because it was terrible.
Well, it led us to it, and I'd like to ask you to share an extract from us, from the book, that pivotal scene, but also, keeping in mind this is something you started writing 10 years ago, and here it is.
Yeah, sure. So just to give some context, which I failed to do before, sorry, everyone. This is Jamie Hogarth. So it's his last day of school, and he's lived a bit of a charmed life, apart from a childhood illness, which is something that his mother carries, Lillian. She remembers when her little boy was very sick, but he doesn't remember it. He was so little, so it hasn't affected him in the same way. Jamie has a best friend called Jez, and they've been friends since kindergarten, and they have a third friend, Mark, who is part of their social group. But Jamie and Mark, there's a bit of friction there, for reasons that become clearer as the book goes on. So where I'm going to pick up, Jamie has just been in the principal's office, and he was called in, and at first he thought it was going to be something bad, but it's turned out to be something good. And Jez and Mark are in full muck-up day mode on the last day of school. Where have you been anyway? Mark asks brusquely. Jamie hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. He faltered. He was saved from having to explain by a shot of paint that felt like a bullet. He touched his hand to his head and discovered it was wet. Something flinty had hit Jamie in the back of his skull. His fingers were blue. He felt another shot in the back and spun around. A kid called Ryan West was grinning while cocking a black rifle-like piece of machinery. He aimed it at Mark and fired. The pellet hit with force. Blue splattered across Mark's bare chest. Mark shouted out in pain. What the hell? Paint gun, Ryan said. He was chewing a toothpick like a cartoon GI. Jamie ripped off his blazer. The back was destroyed by ink. $200 down the drain. You dick, Jamie yelled. He grabbed one of the black water balloons and hurled it at Ryan, who swerved, dodging it. Ryan laughed at the ineffectual attack, then unleashed a spray of paint gun bullets against Jamie's windscreen and hood. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Hey, Mark yelled. The thin blue paint washed down the front of Jez's car, revealing a rash of dents left by the pellets. You're going to pay for that, Jez yelled. Ryan laughed. I'll give you $1 for it. Jez and Jamie had been friends with Ryan when they were little, but in high school they'd found themselves playing against him on the football field. As Ryan grew bigger and more aggressive, the competition had fermented into hostility. Jez pitched a soy sauce balloon at Ryan, and this time it connected, soaking him in pungent black liquid. Ryan licked his lips and laughed. He aimed his paintball rifle at Jez and fired a pellet straight at his heart. Jez blocked it just in time, taking a blue bullet to the back of his hand. Fuck, he cried, eyes watering. The wound gushed blood. Jamie grabbed some black water balloons and tossed them quickly, 1, 2, 3, at Ryan. Each hit, Ryan's entire shirt was drenched dark. He retaliated by firing at them again. 2 pellets hit Mark, who threw back a water balloon, which missed. He picked up a glass Coke bottle from the ground and chucked that. Ryan dodged it easily, laughing, invincible with his weapon. Jamie turned to see Jez picking a bit of plastic pellet out of the gash on his hand. That looks bad, he said. Watch out, Jez warned. Ryan fired a hailstorm of pellets until his gun began to click. He's run out, Jamie said. Get him, Mark yelled. With a smug grin still on his face, Ryan turned and fled. Jamie, Jez and Mark took off after him, tossing soy sauce balloons that smashed at his feet. Ryan turned a corner onto the main road where cars were starting to bank up for the school pickup. Jamie spotted a knobby stick on the nature strip. He scooped it up and rounded the corner to the main road, edging out Jez and Mark. Ryan slowed to a jog as he approached the driveway by the dry cleaners. A 4-wheel drive was pulling out of the car park into traffic on the busy road. There were more vehicles behind it. Jamie threw the stick at Ryan's feet, tripping him. Ryan yelped as he hit the concrete, scraping skin off his hands and knees. When he got up, he was bloodied and wild-eyed. His chin was cut badly. Jamie was stunned. He hadn't expected Ryan to fall so violently. His impulse was to ask if he was okay, but then Ryan screamed, "You fuck," and charged at Jamie, crash tackling him to the ground. They fell hard, all elbows and knuckles, and fought, furiously wrestling. The paint gun was on a strap around Ryan's body. Its nozzle dug into Jamie's chest. Ryan got in a quick hit to Jamie's stomach, drawing an oof. Jez appeared a moment later and hooked his hands around Ryan's arms. He pulled Ryan off Jamie, with Ryan swinging and kicking. "You stuffed my hand," Jez shouted, shoving Ryan to the ground. Ryan landed hard on his paint gun and grunted in pain. "Come here," Jez grabbed Jamie's hand and pulled him up. "Let's go." Ryan clambered to his feet, rubbing blood from his chin. An SUV blared its horn. They were blocking its path. 2 soy projectiles flew past. Mark was barreling towards them, hurling bombs and shouting like one of Achilles' myrmidons. "You're going to pay," Ryan spat at them, spraying bloody saliva onto his chest and chin. The car honked again. "Let's go," Jez muttered, grabbing Jamie's arm. Ryan swung at them, roaring, but missed by a mile. They were already sprinting away. Jamie cackled as they rounded a corner that was edging out of the dry cleaners car park. Outnumbered, Ryan didn't chase them. As they belted down the road, Jamie felt something slip from his pocket. His wallet, Hoover's business card. He stopped and turned, searching for it. "Hogs," Jez called urgently. "What are you doing?" "My wallet." "Shit," Jamie said, frantic. Jez was watching, panic on his face, as he looked for Ryan. "Come on," Mark urged. "Isn't it just your library card and your opal?" Jez asked. "You don't need it. We've got to get out of here before that dick rounds up his mates." "Hoover gave me a business card. I've got to find it," Jamie said. "What? For a job? He gave me a business card to help me get a job." The last thing he saw was the confused look on Jez's face. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It spun him around. "You spoilt fuck." The fist connected with a crack. Jamie fell back hard. One punch, lights out. Sorry, we just had a little tension Just trying to.
Okay, my children are trying to break into the room.
I could hear her thumping at the door.
Lights out. I love this scene because it just builds and builds and builds and builds, and then bang, and it's this completely pivotal moment. It, in a lot of ways, it comes out of nowhere. You're not quite. I mean, I didn't read the blurb before I started the book, so I wanted to go in cold. So I didn't quite know what happened, and then it really hits you. Is that sort of like the setup that you wanted, that this really did come out of nowhere and it just tips everybody in the family into this completely different realm?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's what happens when something shocking happens. You're blindsided. And this is sort of a really literal, sorry, I've just got a little notification. It's a really, just literal version of that. Something just, completely out of the blue. And certainly there are a few different incidents that I've encountered during my reporting years that fed into not just the creation of that scene, but what that scene would be. And for people who have read the book, there's something that happens about halfway through that shines different light on that scene. So there are a number of reasons that I chose to do it that way.
Genevieve, can you tell us a little bit about your work as a journalist? You worked with Women's Weekly, you were a features writer. You can have this ability to dive into a story. It's not just telling the news. You know, you're in a position where you can actually connect with people and explore. Did that come in handy when you did, the novel, which is a far larger article, a far larger project? You could actually follow this family all the way.
It's a really fortunate job to be in. For that exact reason, you do get to, and that's why I applied for the position. I used to be a court reporter in Victoria, and would get to listen to. My job was to cover the crime of the day, and then one of the things that was always a little bit frustrating about it, well, the only thing that was really frustrating about it, because it was such an interesting, stimulating job, was that every day there were sort of three things that would happen. So you would cover that story, that story, that story, and then the next day it'd be that story, that story, that story, and you would get this glimpse into people's lives, but you wouldn't get to tell more of it. And that was true for the victims, but also sometimes the perpetrators as well. And I applied for the job at the Weekly, and now get to spend a lot of time with the people that we feature in the magazine. But that also, the court experience that I just described kind of goes to this book as well, because I think something that I found again and again in court was you would hear one half of a story and the victim's half, and you would always think of the perpetrator, oh my God, how are you allowed to walk this earth? And then you would hear their defense lawyer tell their stories, and not all the time, but there would definitely be times where you would just think, my God, this person never had a chance. And exploring that sort of other side of the story was something that I really wanted to do with this book.
It's fabulous. And the exploration also led you into, a place where I'm thinking maybe your journalistic experience came in pretty handy. You had to, it's a depiction of a spinal injury. Can you tell us a bit about how you fleshed that out? You understand you sought out a lot of knowledge. You connected with a lot of different people who shone light into that area for you.
Yeah, that was when I sort of embarked upon the book. That was something that was really daunting, particularly telling the story of the acquiring of a disability as someone who doesn't have a disability. And many, many times I just thought, oh, look, maybe I shouldn't. It really haunted me a lot throughout the writing process, but I connected with an amazing guy named Jason Climo, who was actually the first catwalk model in a wheelchair in Australia. And we became, he agreed to work with me, and we would do interviews. And he did a read at the end of the process just to make sure he felt like it was fair and full and accurate, and we became really good friends, and I like am so grateful to have like met him and have him help me through that process. Yeah, he's great. And then you know, just a little bit of help from Spinal Cord Injury Australia. Got to go to some rehab gyms. Very fortunately, my partner's younger sister is she works with people with spinal cord injuries, so I was always grilling her, and she was like giving me lecture notes and things like that. And there are some great books out there written by people who have had a very similar experience to Jamie's. So it was really eye-opening, and I hope that I've done it justice. I think so far. Yeah.
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 And the thing I enjoyed about it most is that, you know, it not only is, you know, the facts are accurate, it's the emotional journey Jamie's on. It's how his impressions of what's happened to him alter and change, and how he goes on this emotional journey, and you take us through all of those layers to ultimately come out the other side of it. Was that something that happened during the writing, or did you really want to show that journey?
Yeah, it was really important to me that this isn't a story of he got better and that's the happy ending. And certainly the experience of having a catastrophic injury isn't positive for everyone by any stretch. But I really thought it was important to represent, I don't know how to put this exactly, but I wanted to show that, I don't know, I don't want to say that it was a positive thing, but to show disability in a positive light. And Jason was really integral in that, because that was definitely his experience. And yeah, speaking with Spinal Cord Injury Australia, they sort of said, look, that's not, you know, it's not all sunshine and happiness, and which I knew, but I just tried to walk a really clear line to show a positive representation of disability while also within a realistic setting.
Absolutely, that's great. And you know, and also this is an ensemble piece. It's not just Jamie; it's his mum too. And the part that really affected me as well was, you know, it's every parent's worst nightmare that your child is hurt. I've got two young daughters, and so reading, I couldn't help but feeling those things. And the scene where she's that mother's intuition. She knows something's not quite right. There's a lot of, that was really cool for me, because there's also some mystical elements in this, you know, where Jamie goes to the odd place, I suppose, the place in between. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because there's this, I don't know, it's not like fantastical, but there's this underlying, I don't know, a shift in reality sometimes that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's that was a funny one, because that's kind of where the book started. Sorry.
Terrible question. Yeah.
No, it's funny, because that's where the book kind of started, and then it ends up being something completely different. And then at the end, I thought, should I remove this completely? But then other parts of the book fell over. The very first start of this book was an interview I did with a young woman who was a nun. She was in her 20s, and we were talking about why young people choose religious vocation in this day and age, in a really open sort of way, not like, why did you do that, but just like, tell us about your experience. And she had a catastrophic injury, very different to Jamie's, but she had talked about having a sort of a mystical experience and how that had informed her religious journey. It's not her story, but that really sunk into my brain and caused me to write the first attempt of this book. And then when I decided to revisit it and do it in quite a different way, I really wanted to keep that element. And this is probably a bit of a weird tangent to go down, but I'm just going to tell you. Something that really connected with me about her story is how vivid it can feel when you're dreaming. And I am someone who faints a lot. And so that idea of like losing consciousness suddenly and then being jolted into like a different fantasy world was really vivid for me. And I imagined, like, if you had a catastrophic injury like Jamie does, what happens in those 5 days when you're in a coma? Is it just black, or are you dreaming, or is it a sort of something in between, or what is that? So that's what that element is about.
I'm glad you kept it. I found it very beautiful. It
Oh,
was
I'm
very,
glad. I'm
it was a
glad.
nice contrast of things. Also, like, maybe just a word nerd comment. I love your use of flashbacks within the scene. It's not a shift in narrative. It's that there's, people remember things and they think back, and then but they stay in the moment. I found that very realistic, and it was very,
Okay.
yeah.
Glad. Thank you.
Done before, or is it a technique you've done before, or is it something that you've developed over time?
No, I think it's new to this one. This is a funny one. It was far more experimental than any other thing that I'd tried, but I just decided to just do some different things, and I hope that it worked.
Now, shall we talk emotions? Because I'd like to read a line to you that really stood out. So this is from Lillian's perspective. She says she's remembering Jamie's illness as a child. She remembered it like it was yesterday, and how she tried not to think of Jamie being cured, fearing that by imagining his recovery, she'd somehow snuff it out. It's such a powerful line. It's that when you're in the worst possible situations, that sometimes it's easier to give up hope because you don't want to wish it away. It's a strange dichotomy to explore, and then it reappears when Jamie is injured as an adult and they have to work through that. This is a very complex emotional ground to work through. Why did you, word nerd again, why did you choose to make it so complex? It's such a chewy subject. It really those characters out, really brought them to life.
I'm glad that thank you for saying that. It's so wonderful to hear people connecting with characters, because you just never know, writing such a solitary pursuit, and you're sort of working away thinking, God, I hope this sounds real. I think that is definitely how my mind works. When you're sort of hoping for something, you try not to think about it, because you're almost feeling you're going to jinx it. And anytime one of the characters was having a moment of emotional introspection, I would just kind of try and put myself in their shoes and imagine not only how I would react, but how they would react. They're not me. So would they react in that way? And if not, what way would they react in? But definitely, I think when you're a writer, you probably have lots of characters that borrow little bits of your personality, or maybe not. I don't know.
What do they say? You're a writer when you can write someone smarter than you are.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
I'm terrible at maths, but I've written a character who's really good at maths. Maybe I should
Right.
that person.
Right.
No. On the emotion side, was it difficult to say the early stuff in the hospital? That's a space where everyone was being very controlled. They were controlling it, to be very careful. Even Jamie, everyone was. I love the doctor, by the way, as well. He was a very efficient man. How did you handle the switch between the reservations everyone had to when life does have to go on, and the friction starts to come? Was it difficult to handle the shift, or did that just come very naturally?
No, I think that came quite naturally. Yeah, sorry, short answer.
That's all good. What was the hardest part to write of the story itself? Who was the most difficult character?
Good question. Look, no, definitely all of the spinal technical stuff it's just so you don't know what you don't know. So you think that you might be on the right track. And I remember going back to my various wonderful experts and being like, oh, I didn't think of this. What happens in this situation? I had what were some of those questions I asked? Like, I remember I had a post-surgical physiotherapist who'd worked with a lot of spinal patients who was amazing, very helpful. She's actually a friend of my sister's. And I had chatted with her and I felt that I had enough to write a convincing scene. And that's the great thing about books. It's not like a film or television where you have to show everything. You can just kind of imply things and they need to be accurate, but you don't need to describe every single piece of equipment in the room. What was it? I think it was something about, would there have been noises in the hospital room or something like that? And I had to go back to her and she was like, oh yes, this and this and this. And I thought, oh my God, thank God I asked you, because I'd written that it was silent, or I'd written that it was noise. I can't remember what it was, but it was just that thing where it sort of popped into my head and I thought, oh, I better check. And that happened at every single step of because he goes into rehab and he's in hospital for a long time, and then he moves hospital rooms, which was something Jason told me about, that progression. When you first come in, you're right next to the nurses station, and then they move you down and you sort of graduate out of the emergency ward. That seems so strange to me, because why would you move a spinal cord patient more than you need to? Oh, and being in a wheelchair after a week after having your spine reconstructed, that was insane to me. Definitely that was the most difficult part, but just thank God I had so many people who were generous and willing to answer questions and like text late at night thinking, oh, what about this? So yeah.
Sure. I've just got a question before I'll switch to some in the chat, but just can you tell us about the Hogarth family and what their trajectory in life in a way should have been if the accident didn't happen, if the incident didn't happen? Who are the Hogarths and what were they on track for?
That's actually a really good question, because I kind of feel like the accident is almost a correction for the Hogarth family. So perhaps if the accident hadn't occurred, maybe things would not have turned out that great for the Hogarth family. I don't know how many people have read or not read, or how far in people are, because I don't want to give too much away. Certainly, each family member at the point that the accident occurs sort of takes a good hard look at themselves and changes something, or thinks about changing something, attempts to change something. And if that accident hadn't happened, would they do that? And where might they end up?
That's the thing. It's very Sydney, isn't it? It's private schools, privilege, Catholic scene, high-powered banking jobs. Jamie's named after his father, who's named after his grandfather, ad infinitum. There's this, like you say, there's this trajectory of privilege in their lives. In fact, even their oldest daughter. She's quite a formidable character, but I liked her shift. What attracted you to writing it as an ensemble piece rather than honing in on, maybe this could easily have been just from the mother's perspective, but you moved it out?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I can't really give you a clear answer, which is kind of the theme of the evening for me. It just comes down to, I think, I really struggled to get it into a narrative that had forward momentum, and all of the characters were there, and then I think they kind of grew as they became more interesting, and it just ended up we ended up with an ensemble instead of a sort of a one or two character led book, but definitely 5 perspectives is something that I won't be doing again anytime soon.
Do 6, keep going.
No. One.
Genevieve, there's lots of questions to ask, but I'll switch to a few from the chat. Megan says, I think it takes great skill to write from different perspectives and to do it well. She didn't connect to the main characters, but the boys felt like they were very young, privileged men. That's in her experience. How did you find writing from this perspective? Do you ever imagine the main character as someone else? Was there a different flavor that you considered for any of them?
That's an excellent question. The first version that I referred to earlier, the main character was a young woman. And when did I change it to a boy? I think the injury changed. The event changed, the inciting incident changed to someone being punched, and that more naturally would have been a male character, and then that opens up a lot of other avenues to explore with what led to that violent moment and so forth. So yes, definitely, I started off with that main character as a woman. It was fun to try and put myself in the position of a male point of view. I enjoyed it. It felt like a good exercise, and I hope it was convincing.
And Georgia Grubelich is asking, it took you 10 years to write the novel. What was the most dramatic change in terms of plot, structure, character journey? You touched on that a little bit, but when did you realize they needed to change? What was the pivot point for you?
So actually, one of the changes came quite late. Lillian was always quite a prominent character, but she was nowhere near as prominent as she is. And in fact, the book previously started at chapter 2 with Jamie's first day of school. I think the line is, Jamie Hogarth had a lot to look forward to. He just had to get through the day. And without wanting to give away too much, there's kind of a mirror of that later in the book. And that previously was where the book started. And I don't know how much this I should reveal, but do you know what? I'm just going to tell you everything. HarperCollins was reading it, and they rejected it. And one of the reasons was they felt that people would think it was a young adult book because it was about a boy, and they felt like the mother character needed to be brought forward more, which in hindsight I think was really good feedback. And so I wrote several more chapters from Lillian's perspective, and then reworked it from there. And it changed the whole shape of the book and the whole flavour of it, because it was less driven by Jamie and more driven by Lillian. And I think doing that also brought the other characters to the fore more.
And Genevieve, Tanya's asking, did the punch scenario come from your court reporting experiences?
The punch scenario come from my court reporting experiences? A little bit. There's nothing, there's not one case that it's directly drawn from, but definitely elements of both the incident itself and the outcome, and also the reason that the punch occurs, are all have things drawn from cases that I've seen in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. But in this case as well, like you say, you got a glimpse with court reporting, that crossroads of misery. Yeah. Whereas with this, you could actually take it a lot deeper. Did you base any of the I suppose the details or the developments on things you learned through court reporting, or did you project that, or
the details of the developments? Not specific. No, there's no one-to-one, but definitely something that I do always do in my fiction writing is, it's almost always like the most outlandish things are things that I've seen. And I have had a lot of feedback from the mothers in particular, my first book, but also a little bit from this book, that things are unrealistic. And I just want to say to those people, you should see some of the things that people are capable of, both positive and negative. Like, people will blow you away. There's nothing that I've ever written that I thought, oh, that's a bit of a stretch, that I hadn't seen somewhere.
It's a great answer. It's true. Yeah. People are capable of extraordinary things, good and bad. Yeah. You captured some pretty extraordinary things in The Gifted Son with how the Hogarths respond to it. Can you, I don't want to give away the game too much, but is there a particular shift in their lives or thinking that you connected to the most? In their positive reactions, or the way they came through?
There's one little thing, and it's sort of not what you're asking, and I feel a little bit, this is quite personal, but is absolutely true. Kate, who I'm not like at all, I'm not a high-powered, I think she's a consultant, and I don't, stride around in stilettos and suits. But there's a moment where she gets promoted, and Jamie, who is much younger than her, sends her a message saying, oh, well done, you really deserve it. And it kind of really stops her in her tracks because she's so busy with her career, and it doesn't even occur to her that her little brother would know what was going on with her, let alone that he would care to reach out. And I remember it was a book deal, actually, one of the book deals I got. My littlest brother, who's 9 years younger than me, sent me a message saying basically that. And we're not, Jamie and Kate, we do, I think we have quite a good relationship, but it did still really strike me because he's so much younger than me, and it was such a thoughtful thing. And I thought, oh, it really touched me. And so certainly that moment, I wanted to capture that feeling. Kate's a bit more callous than I am, so it was a bit more extreme in that case. But yeah, definitely the whole book is littered with little things that I've stolen from the people I know, moments that I've stolen from my family and friends' lives.
Indeed. That's a good thing to do. So, George is asking again, also, how did you recover from the HarperCollins rejection? Did you wallow at all, or did you pull yourself up by the bootstraps?
It's always a bit of a, it doesn't feel great, but the publisher had published some of my previous books, and she called me and we were on the phone for about 40 minutes. So she was really clear and gentle and encouraging, and it was the best rejection you could have hoped for. And the book wasn't ready, to be honest. Like, she was right, that it wasn't there. So it's easy to say that in hindsight. It was definitely a bit of a blow, but it's been doing this for a while now, and rejection is part of it. So we got there in the end.
Do you collect your rejections on a spike like Stephen King, or?
When I was younger, I used to have a bit of a pile, but not anymore.
I burn mine as offering.
Yeah, ritual burning.
Crystal says, can you talk some more on how Mark's socioeconomic background set him behind compared to his other peers in his high school?
Yeah.
Maybe about the character as well.
Yeah. So Mark is the third friend that I mentioned before. Jamie and Jez are the two best friends, and what happened was Jamie is sort of a high achiever. He became elected to the Student Representative Council, and Jez was sort of on his own a little bit, and he and Mark formed a bond, and now Jamie's a bit jealous of that bond. And so that's the dynamic going on there. And look, it's kind of, the Mark thing's funny because I moved high schools when I was in year 11, and I went to school on the other side of town that was, I guess, a bit fancier, as a private school. And there was a bunch of us that used to get the train across from Essendon, and very much I was in the secondhand uniform. And the story that I always used to tell is my shoes from my last school were brown and the uniform at my new school was black. And Mum was like, oh, I'm not buying any new shoes. And she just bought some spray paint and sprayed them, which I think is very hilarious now. But, when you're a teenager, you're really self-conscious, and yeah. And look, it was fine. But I definitely really dug into that teen angst of what it feels like to be different and feeling like everyone's looking at you. And I certainly wasn't a scholarship student like Mark was, but I wanted to make his it shows how he got into that school. So Mark's a scholarship student, and he kind of gets teased a bit for being an egghead. And I just wanted to really widen that divide between him and his peers as much as possible. To be clear, my experience was nothing like that, but there was like a seed of just feeling like a bit of an outsider that I really wanted to explore and push wide open with the Mark character.
Yeah. How about a word nerd question from me? You mentioned Leanne Moriarty before. What sort of writers have inspired you? And it can be from the widest of your collection. Who inspires you professionally? Who fills your cup spiritually? What sort of books are you reading?
Yeah, so one of my favorite writers is Curtis Sittenfeld, who has a book coming out in April called Romantic Comedy. Her last book was Rodham, the very unexpected reimagining of Hillary Clinton's life if she hadn't married Bill, which
that was wild.
Yeah. I've never seen a fictionalized account of a real living person before, but I loved it. I also really love Meg Wolitzer, who most people would know from The Wife. I've just recently finished a book of hers called The 10-Year Nap. And another favourite of mine of hers is The Female Persuasion. What else? I'm currently reading The Poisonwood Bible. Oh, and I just read Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which, if you haven't read it, oh my God, it's amazing. I loved it. It was one of those books where I wanted to read it as slowly as possible so it wouldn't end. It was fantastic.
I love the Poisonwood Bible. That's I found it hard to keep track of who was who. I had to take notes, but I love the language in that, and yeah, the depth of it. Yeah, just
Can I ask you a question about the Poisonwood Bible? Did it take you sort of about 150 pages before you really? Yes. Yeah.
Someone told me once it's like Russian novels have a moat. They're like 600 pages and you got to get past the 200. It's like the moat. Once you pass the moat.
I haven't heard that one either, but that's great. My boss was reading it and she was saying to me, I've been trying to read this book for 10 years and I'm going to read it. And then she came back from the Christmas break, and said, I cracked it and it was great. Awesome. And I said, oh, maybe I should try, because I couldn't get through the moat either. So I'm through the moat now. So I'm enjoying it.
I found Little Life like that as well. Like the first 100, I was like, oh, and then whoa.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Back to some chat questions. Tanya's saying, do you seek feedback during the writing process? And if you do, does this change your plot and story?
I have a very good friend in Melbourne who nothing gets published without her say so. She's my reader, named Jacinta. She actually was one of the people who helped me find Jason. And she very selfishly had a baby a year ago, so she was less available to me, Jacinta. But no, she's great. And my partner, Matt, who did the great lighting rig, has become a editor of sorts as well. He lets me read him chapters and things, which is really helpful. But something else that I found, if there are writers listening, I will often read a chapter aloud and record it, because reading aloud, I think, is helpful in and of itself. And then if you listen back, it really helps you find I think it helps you find what's not working. Maybe some things slip through that didn't quite work, but I find that a really useful process.
That's great, thank you. This is your COVID baby. What was it like writing a book during COVID compared to the before time? It seems like a billion years ago, but staying inside all the time and not being able to see people, did it change how you felt about writing, how you connected to the process?
Yeah, it's a really funny one, and I probably shouldn't say this. I probably should say this is the best book ever and everyone should read it and buy 10 million copies and blah, blah, blah. But I actually really struggled with this book. And I feel like if I'd been writing a different book during COVID, it might have been an escape, but it felt like a real, it was really hard I just didn't know how to make it work. And one of the big barriers was when I decided to plunge in, I thought I have to go to rehab gyms, I need to see gyms, I need to, if I can, get into hospitals. So all of that just completely went out. Like, that just wasn't possible. And so I was in this situation where I was thinking, should I even be attempting this? Because I can't do those excursions, that research that I need to be able to do. And I felt really blocked and stuck. And it was, previously with other books, they feel like a real escape for me. It's like a sort of a pleasurable hobby, whereas this one was, and I did want to write it, like I knew I wanted to do it, but I just felt really hampered by the fact that I couldn't do those things that I wanted to be able to do. I was eventually able to do them, so the book got finished, but it took me much longer than most other books, which was hard as well, because you want to get through it. And I
was going to say, you're giving me hope. I remember my first book, I worked on it for years and it was terrible. But there's something about it. There's something, I'm still attracted to it. And I was still, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking maybe one day. What made you reconnect to your first project rather than something else? Was it that pull?
Yeah, I was always obsessed with the sort of the central story that unfolds, that I tried to tell years and years ago, and I just didn't have the tools or the experience or the skills, and I really wanted to have a crack. And it was a really good experience. I hope to have an ongoing career as an author, and I feel like doing this book was an important step in that development process.
That's great, Genevieve. And what's next? What do you yeah, I mean that's always the tricky question. But
yeah. So my publisher doesn't know this yet. My agent has seen some chapters, but I'm writing a sort of I don't know if anyone's read The Mothers, but it's kind of it's not a sequel really. It's kind of a companion piece spin-off, where we follow actually one character, but an unexpected character, and see what they do next. And it's quite a different story, but it does a lot of the same things that The Mothers does in terms of ethical, like really quite big ethical dilemmas that are based on real things that are happening that people would be surprised about. Maybe not everyone, maybe some people are across it, but yeah, just some pretty surprising things happening in the world of genetic editing and that sort of thing. This, again, inspired by some research at the Women's Weekly.
Fantastic. And another massive question. This is sort of inspired by Almost Famous, but what do you love about writing? What is it that makes you do this? What's your I don't know, not your like the private high moment, but why do you keep doing this? What things?
It's just so fun, don't you think? It's it is hard, but that's what makes it. When you crack it, you kind of feel great. So yeah, I love to read. I imagine everyone here is a big reader, so it's that same kind of joy of getting to spend time with characters, and thinking about what would they do and what if this happened and so forth.
That's great. Well, one more question as well from chat. Tanya's also asking, do your family and friends recognize the bits you steal from them, and do they call you on it?
Nobody has yet. Have I ever asked permission? I've never been explicit enough. Although two friends of mine, again, if you've read The Mothers, you'll know that there's a character called Nick who is quite does some things that are a bit questionable, and those things that he does are with a woman named Rose, and I have friends, a couple named Nick and Rose, and after they read the book, they kind of, you know, the next time I saw them, they were like, now look here, and they were like, you defamed us, being journalists. So actually in The Gifted Son, we have a hero called Nick who is walking the Dakota Trail to raise funds for the Legacy War Widow Fund, and he wanders off the path and gets lost and is rescued by another hero whose name is Rose. So Rose and Nick.
Justice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice being the creator, isn't it? You can, you can do what you like. There's also just a reminder from Julianne Tobin that The Mothers is also available in Libby in audiobook and ebook. So if you enjoyed The Gifted Son, check out The Mothers. And also wait for the quasi sequel. The spiritual.
Sorry, what was that? Cut out.
We'll call it the continuation.
The continuation. Yeah, I need to come up with a pithy little term for it. The continuation. That's good. Yeah.
Something. The adjacent storyline. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a little question. We've got 5 minutes left, so if you want to jump in with a question, please do now. So Megan's asking, I have a bit of a spoiler what if question. Did you consider Jamie not recovering or not waking up from any of his comas?
No, I always knew what Jamie's trajectory was going to be. there are a few elements in there that I won't say what they are for people who haven't read the book, but there are, if you, and no one should do this and no one can do this because it was never published, but the first version from way back when, there are definitely things in that book that happen in this book, and it was that arc that kept me coming back to this story and made me want to tell this story. So no, Jamie's kind of journey was always going to be what it is.
Thank you, Genevieve. I guess the final question for me is kind of a philosophical one, but this is ultimately a good story, a positive story. It gets there through great difficulty. You know, we're really, but do we need more stories like that? We don't, you know, where there are increasingly, we're having great stories told to us that are good and positive, but they do take things very seriously and they bring in a lot of serious elements. Is this the sort of storytelling we need as we grapple with a complex world? We don't need fairy tales anymore, but you know, we need good meaty stories like this that actually treat us seriously, but also show us hope.
I think we need all sorts of stories. You know, sometimes there's nothing that you want more than like a good feel-good fairy tale rom-com. But definitely, yeah, I love the idea that more and more people are telling difficult and complex stories. And this is definitely, I feel like this is kind of fairy tale-ish in that you get a resolution that's positive, which is, as we know, is not always the case. But I really like the idea of showing that no matter how bad things get, there can always be hope.
Thank you, Genevieve. And Nicole Thompson has a lovely comment. Thank you both for such an engaging chat about a book I could not put down last weekend. And thank you, Libby, for bringing the online book club to WA. Well, it's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm the same. I inhaled this. My wife and I read before bed, and you know, it's usually her reading and going, but this time it was me. I was like, oh, geez, what's no?
I'm glad.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, it's been fabulous speaking to you, Genevieve. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for staying up so late for us, and also to everybody who enjoyed tonight. The Libby Book Club is back on March the 15th, the Ides of March, and I'm going to be speaking to Ben Hobson about his new book, The Death of John Lacey, which is the webinar for that is available, and it's also available through the Libby app. So just another couple of really lovely comments. Megan saying, thank you. I really enjoyed Jamie's journey, the realistic ups and downs and recovery and all the associated emotions within Jamie and his family and friends were refreshing. Genevieve, congratulations on writing The Gifted Son. I hope you're enjoying releasing this book into the world and speaking about it. It was lovely to speak to you tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you for your great questions and for everyone who came and joined in tonight. It's been really fun, and I've loved getting to tell you more about the Hogarth family.
Well, thank you. And good night, everybody. Thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you for the next Libby Book Club for WA. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.